It's the Fantasy Commissioner Show.
Hey, it's the Fantasy Commissioner Show, the show for commissioners by a commissioner. I am Reginald James, the Commish. Come join me here on the live feed at Rebel.tv. You can also hit me up on Twitter at Commish Show. That's the tag. And if you're feeling it and you want to send me an email, you can do that. The Commish Show at Outlook.com. Yummy.com. Here we are again. Hey. Happy Friday. Happy week 9. Oh, is it too early for me to get sad? Is it too early for me to have those bittersweet feelings? Oh, is it? I don't know. It's week 9, man. So we have 17 weeks, 16 weeks played out in 17 weeks because of the bye. We know the drill. That's past the halfway point. And then last week I started talking about you playoff folks, and then I started ranting about it. I'm not going to do that today. But we are definitely past the halfway point for you 13-week playoff folks, for you 14-week playoff folks. So welcome to another edition of the FCS, the Fantasy Commissioner Show. So I'm really excited. About this. I've got some news to share. I have a trash can that's in the way. So I'm going to be a guest on the Old School Fantasy Hour. The Old School Fantasy Hour, which you can hear every day from 1 to 2 Eastern Standard Time on the Fantasy Sports Radio Network. Next Wednesday. I'll be a guest next Wednesday talking about the show, I would assume. Whatever day. I'm ready to talk about whatever they want to talk about, but maybe I can bring up some of these good questions that I get. But I'm going to share the show and share about what I do, and maybe they'll have someone call in and I can answer some questions. That'll be cool. Nonetheless, I'm really excited because here's the kicker. I'll be talking to Scott Ingle and George Kurtz. Those are the two guys that do the show. Hella cool, baby. Because if you're really into fantasy, you know that Scott Ingle, he's like a legend in the fantasy world. So this is pretty cool for me. I'm like, whoa, awesome. I'm like, whoa. So I'm looking to have a good time, and just hey, sitting in front of a mic, talking about one of your passions. You can't beat that. You can't beat that. So hopefully you can check it out or listen to it on the archives, because they archive the shows just like I do. So if you haven't discovered the Fantasy Sports Network, you should check it out. And that's the Earl Fantasy Sports Network. It's about 3 weeks ago now. I was on their television side of things on Fantasy Sports Today with Ashley Dockin, and Chris Meany. So they have a television presence, a streaming presence for television, and they have a radio network as well. I think they're trying to compete against Sirius XM, although there's a lot of cross-pollination going on between Sirius XM fantasy shows and the Fantasy Network shows. So I'm not quite sure that they're competitors actually, but or the two entities, the two people, the two companies that own Sirius XM and Fantasy Sports Network, which is Anthem. Maybe they just don't care because, it works. It works. People go back and forth and listen to both. They have hosts that they like, and so maybe it works. It's just a thought that I crossed my mind. So if you're not able to listen, it's just like anything else, on demand, archives, whatever people choose to call it. Hopefully you check it out, because I'm going to have some fun, just like I try and do here every week. And if you appreciate what I do, you might want to see what I have to say. And by the way, I just might actually play it. Yeah, see, there you go. So you have to listen to it anyway. So check it out. So I didn't ask, should I be able to talk about this? I'm not sure. So this is all I'm going to say. I always offer, let me change that language. I'm very much appreciative of Rabble. Do I want to tell the story real quickly? I'll tell the story real quickly. In a little, here's the cliff notes of how I actually got on Rabble and started doing the Fantasy Commissioner show. But the what's the lesson of the story is Rabble.tv, the folks at Rabble.tv, they have a good idea and they work really hard to put forward a good product, and they have been very supportive of me from day one. So every once in a while I will remind someone of that, whoever it is, if you're listening, but I'm going to bring it up every once in a while because it's just true. They've made my stay at the Motel 6, my stay here at Rabble, or the time that I've spent here at Rabble working on the Fantasy Commissioner show at Rabble.tv. They've been, just crazy supportive. So I haven't heard of Miss Matthews in a long time. Her name is I haven't heard from a lot of people. So I'm about to go off on another tangent. So let me rewind. So this is what I'll say. So they work. Oh, I was supposed to tell you my little story, right? Once upon a time, there was a guy, and he wanted to do a podcast. Anyways, okay. So no, I didn't just eat 3 bags of chocolate M&Ms. I really didn't. I actually didn't. That's not my style. Not a big candy eater. Okay, so I knew in my mind, I had been trying to work on, I want to do a podcast. I want to talk about something that, that I love, football, so on and so forth. And I thought, you know what? I'll call it the Fantasy Commissioner show. I'll help people out. People always have a hard time. People hate commissioners. People don't want to be commissioners. Why? I don't understand. I've got a lot of experience. Let me see if I can share. Let me see if I can help. And then just one day, an email popped up. It was from Mark Stern. Email popped up in my box. And I think I came across their radar because of the post, the news items that I put up on Fantasy Commission on FantasyPros.com. At the time, I don't think I was writing the Fantasy Commission Q&A. I've had but that's my theory. I should ask them one day. And they thought they wanted to know if I was interested in doing covering live games. That's the premise of Rabble. That's how it started, which is basically people tend to get upset or complain about the broadcasters that they have to listen to, John Gruden. And they really hate listening to people recreate history right in front of our faces, Chris Collinsworth. So they're like, hey, I can do it. I could do it better than that. So Rabble's like, hey, if you think you can do it better, here, you do it. Which is basically it. So there's live broadcasts going on Rabble all the time, and it's pretty expansive. I mean, it's Premier League soccer and softball, and I mean, you name it. And it's mainly sports oriented, but some people will watch TV shows, they'll watch award ceremonies, and they just cover it live. So people are having a lot of fun just exercising their interest and excitement about things that they're passionate about. And like I said, if I get to talk about football, I'm a happy guy. I'm happy. I'll talk about football. That's why when I was on Fantasy Sports today, and that's why when I will talk to Scott Engel and Mr. Kurtz on Wednesday about football or about the Fantasy Football Commissioner Show or about whatever it is with football, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be totally geeked out. So the problem with their offer, as far as I was concerned, was I'm very territorial over my football watching. I look forward to this time of the year. Sunday is my day. My day. I would, and why do men have to have a man cave? What the hell is that? So let's not, I won't even go off on that. Okay, okay, just roll it back. I would love to be in a place where I could have like 10 screens and just watch all the games in my own home. I can't do that, but I do go off every Sunday and I watch every game. The 1 o'clock games, I'm eyeballing them all, and so I'm quite aware of what's happening with all these players. So when I'm talking about things, I'm not just pulling it out of thin air or talking about what I heard. If I'm going to talk about it, I'm talking about it because I saw it with my own eyes. So if I was watching a show and broadcasting for Rabble, that means I'm missing all the other 9 or 8 games that are going on. I just didn't want to do that. Just did not want to do that. So I was very territorial about my me time, my time, where it's, I used to go to a place where I had a buddy. Every once in a while he would come and hang out with me, but most of the time, well, especially this year, I'm by myself, and I like that. I love that solo time. I don't like having anyone with me or people around me, because then you might start talking about stuff and then inevitably you miss things because you're talking and you're looking at the person and you're talking and all that stuff. So I love having my Han Solo time. So I offered to them, I said, well, hey, I would like to do the Fantasy Commissioner Show, and it's about this, and I explained what I wanted to do and what my goals were. And they're like, sure. Not quite sure, how popular that's going to be, but man, go for it. And so I did. And a season went by, and now we're in the second season. And along the way, Megan was her name, and I don't know if she still works with them or not. I should email her and find out. In fact, I might do that tonight. I used to answer questions and stuff in a popular message board or bulletin board or whatever you want to call it. And so she made me banners, she made me widgets, all with the Rabble icon, and it was just fantastic. And it seemed like if I emailed her and I asked her, I can't think of her last name. I'm not sure if I even know her last name. Yeah, I do. It starts with a G, I believe, but it's Megan. I would say, Megan, can't I have a widget that's 30 by 30 because I want to fit it here on a website, and then I swear it almost seemed like instantaneously, boom, and she facilitated it. And so I don't think so. There was a guy, I just called him, Mr. Graphics man, thank Mr. Graphics, but she facilitated it. But it just seemed like almost instantly, boom, in my mailbox, boop, there, what I asked for right there. I mean, just fantastic. And so what brought me to this topic was, I was talking to them this morning, And so since I didn't ask and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to reveal, I will just say this. If you are a regular listener, or not regular listener, well, yeah, if you're a regular listener of the shows on Rabble, including this one, they're really working hard on making the format better. They're working really hard to make it more interactive and to improve the listener experience and, frankly, the caster experience, folks like myself. So stay tuned. I'm looking forward to it. I think it will actually enhance what I'm doing. It'll make it more fun, and I actually think if you actually listen to the show and you actually listen to it live, I think we can really have some fun with this show. I really do. So that's all I'm going to say because I'm not sure what else I can say. Okay, so let's review. Yes, the Packers had injuries in their backfield, and they were forced to be creative, and I think the whole Ty Montgomery stuff was just a bunch of nonsense. It was crazy noise, and it seems to have died down because he was injured last week, so people couldn't start him. And my position was, or my view was, my theory, my perspective was that Green Bay rarely trade for people, and they had the rookie Johnson and Johnson. Is it Don Johnson? Don Jackson? Don Johnson. And I expected now Davis to, after he got more of the plays under control, he would eventually be their running back because Lacy is down. And we know who James Starks is. We know his ceiling. So good handcuff, yes, but you're not going to get the same production, presumably, that you would get if Eddie Lacy was in. So my position is still the same about Ty Montgomery, though. I thought it was wrong. Because I wanted to play Ty Montgomery actually in a DFS card last week, but FanDuel, wait, was it FanDuel? I don't remember now, and I don't want to malign the wrong company. I think it was FanDuel, but I'm not going to make that claim because I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to blame the wrong folks. But someone had him listed as a running back, so I was like, nope, not going to do that. And it didn't matter anyways because he was injured. But so last week I was talking about, he's a wide receiver, and as long as the Packers deem him as such, that's the way he should be designated in fantasy, because we're way into the season now. So it's not like sometimes in the beginning of the season you'll find people with that running back / wide receiver because they were drafted as such, and maybe depending how the front office communicates with the NFL and how the fantasy platforms get their information, sometimes it gets modified before the season, or sometimes it gets modified during the preseason, sometimes it gets modified during camp, that sort of thing. But my position still is, he is what they say he is. And I went through all these examples about, players who actually play like David Johnson, who actually plays in a slot, who will play wide, but he does not have a / running back designation. So anyways, now Davis, unless, you might have been, on your fall vacation to Neptune, I'm glad you're back. So now Davis was cut. In fact, he was cut twice in the same day. The Jets picked him up and they cut him, and so he's gone. So who knows what they're going to do? But as a fantasy player, it's a situation that I'm going to avoid. Consider that the fantasy tip of the day. Consider that. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to come to that conclusion. So I'm not really expressing anything all that fantastic or amazing. It just makes sense to me, but you know how it is with fantasy. People are always looking for that extra edge, and people get excited over someone on a weekly basis. And there's always a pickup of the week, even though, they might not be the best pickup of the week, but they always have to have, these are the guys you should pick up. Sunday game, Monday game, next day. These are the guys you should pick up. So it's an ongoing cycle. So we get that. Speaking of which, so I had a hard time. So part of my discussion about the slash and players playing their designated positions and maybe getting converted, and I couldn't think of Joe Webb's name. Funny thing is, and I'm going to explain. So I didn't notice this, but I'm going to explain what I'm talking about, of course. So I play DFS. So I play Fantasy Aces. I play on FanDuel. I play DraftKings. And just last week, I started playing on Draft Day and Fantasy something. I don't know. But I'm not this big high roller or anything like that. In fact, I just do the free rolls on the I'm not going to put any money in my account on Draft Day or Fantasy, whatever it is that I can't think of the name of that platform. And if I win money, fantastic. I do have money in FanDuel and DraftKings, and it looks like the word is they're going to merge anyway. But I'm not going to really, let's just say I'm playing on house money at the moment, and FanDuel and DraftKings, and Fantasy Aces too. So I'm not going to, I have other things to do with my money, and I'm not one of these big gamblers or high rollers. So I'm never going to have a huge bankroll in any of these games. Getting back to Joe Webb. So lots of times what I'll do, in the beginning of the week, I will claim my spot in these games. And then I'll fill out the roster. I'll put forth my starting roster, usually Saturday, usually late on Saturday, which is just dumb, and I just keep doing it, and I'm falling asleep, and I can't seem to get, I don't know. But I play a lot of cards and all that. Okay, anyway, so the point is, so what I'll do is just I'll just put filler players in the roster. So I'll just invert the prices. So now the top of the list is the least valued players, and I just randomly pick players, and then I'll have a full roster. Then I'll save it, and then I'll revisit the roster days later. Well, as it turned out, and it was funny because I had gone through this whole thing about Joe Webb, and I couldn't think of his name, and the whole story about him being drafted as a quarterback, but then it wasn't going to work out that well, so they actually made him a receiver. He was designated as a wide receiver, but then Ponder and maybe it was Brad, it wasn't Brad Johnson, that's for sure. Quarterbacks ahead of him got hurt, so they made him a quarterback, but on Yahoo and the other fantasy platforms, he wasn't listed as a quarterback, so people got to do the super quarterback thing in non-super quarterback leagues, or the super flex situation, so they could start Joe Webb as a quarterback and a receiver, so blah, blah, blah. We talked about all that. So I do my quick fill, my roster fill maneuver, and then I hit save, and then I noticed that the quarterback that I chose was Joe Webb. He's with the Panthers now. So anyways, just sharing. Okay, in another effort of sharing, which I'm not necessarily inclined to do, I think next year, but I'm going to ask my league for permission first. I think I'm going to make our league public so you can watch what we do, and you can look at the rules that I have set up as a point of comparison. I'm not telling you to copy what I do by any means. You always get a response from someone's like, "You can't tell us what to do, and what you say isn't the law." And it's interesting because Americans and I, which I am, and so yes, I can talk about my own country if I damn well feel like it. We just we're very provincial in our line of thinking sometimes. Never ever say, "You shall do this, and you shall do this because I do it, and I believe this, and that's why you should." That language never even comes out of my mouth, and that's not who I am. But inevitably, there's always someone. You can't tell me what to do. You think you know it all. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we've been dealing with this crap since we were in kindergarten, right? Right, folks? Right? Hey, you and the what color is that? What color is that? Mustard. All right, you and the mustard shirt. You know what I'm talking about, right? Stupid kid crap that some people just don't grow out of even when they're an adults, right? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. He knows what I'm talking about. So, so I thought sometimes it'd be cool to share some of the strategy that I might use, because one thing I keep in mind, and one thing that was important to me when I started the show, was the new commissioner and the new fantasy football player. Because if you're new, it's just like anything else. If you're new to a game or an experience and it doesn't work out so well the very first time, most people aren't inclined to go, well, I was new and, well, I'll try it again. No, most people aren't like that. So I really like to address issues that deal with new people coming to fantasy football, it doesn't matter whether they're players or commissioners. So a couple weeks ago, I was talking about a roster move that I did, a lineup that I put forward 2 weeks ago, week 6, and then I did it again last week in week 8. Because I am one of the believers. Now, I do subscribe to the theory of start your studs. I'm pretty much 99% beholden to the idea that you always start your studs. There are some circumstances that come up that may alter that, but that is one of the rules that I actually do follow. And I had described my situation where I have Phillip Rivers, I have Jameis Winston, and at the time I had Sam Bradford, but I dropped him this week. And the Chargers, my number one quarterback, as far as I'm concerned, is Phillip Rivers. So Phillip Rivers starts in all situations unless something like this comes up. 2 weeks ago in week 6, they played the Denver Broncos. And I just didn't think that was going to work out well. So I pulled Rivers, I pulled Tyrell Williams, and I pulled Hunter Henry. And in their place, I had Alex Smith in place of Phillip Rivers. I had C.J. Fedorowicz in place of Hunter Henry, and I had Chris Conley in place of Tyrell Williams. Well, at the end of the day, it worked out where it was only a 7-point differential. And it wouldn't matter what I did because it was a 7-point differential in favor of my lineup change. And it turned out that it didn't really matter what I did because I lost 143 to 106. So that's one of those days. We have those days, right? And so I had planned ahead for week 8, which was last week. Same situation. And it didn't matter to me whether they were playing at home or playing away. It didn't matter. It's still Denver. It's still Denver's defensive personnel against what the Chargers are putting forward. So last week I pulled Rivers again, and I put Jameis Winston in. And that worked out great. Jameis Winston put up 22 points. I'm rounding because we use fractional points in my league. Jameis Winston got 22 points versus Phillip Rivers 12 points. That's a win for me. Now, because of roster restrictions, I couldn't move to replace Tyrell Williams like I was able to do 2 weeks prior. So he had to play. I had no choice. So I just hope that everyone else played well to give me a win because just like week 6, I didn't think Tyrell Williams was going to do well. In week 8, once again against Denver, he did not. He got 1 or 2 points, 1.52. So he got, rounded up, he got 2 points. He got 1.52 points. There's nothing I could do with that, so I got stuck with that. I pulled Hunter Henry, and I play C.J. Fedorowicz, who got a touchdown and 43 yards receiving, and he got me 10 points versus Hunter Henry's 1.4, but 10-1. So that's another example, new folks. Sometimes you do. If you have a situation where you don't, like if you have Tom Brady stays no matter what until the bye week, and then he goes back in and he stays. That's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. You don't have to think about that. Even if they're playing Denver, it doesn't matter. That's a stud fantasy player. He stays. You don't have to go, well, who do I start? He's playing against Denver, and I have Case Keenum, who's playing against Carolina, and their secondary isn't that good. They're good in run defense, and all that stuff. We hear it all the time. We hear it all the time on radio. You don't need to have those conversations if you have Tom Brady. You just don't. You don't. Okay? So that worked out, and because I had talked about it in prior weeks, I want to talk about it again just to keep the sharing going on. So, which leads me to an item I want to address that I discussed last week. So this week, I had to decide, and it's one of those things, like, sometimes you can just overthink things. Sometimes the matchups look so good, and they are good, and sometimes they look so good, and you bite and you get stuck. Well, I have Jameis Winston. I'm going to assume that you know what happened last night. He threw 3 touchdowns for 261 yards. I just told you what happened, even though you didn't see it. Well, there you go. That's what happened. 24.6 points sitting on my bench because I'm going for it with Phillip Rivers against a better defense, but a defense that has been trending downward. We're talking about the Titans as of late. But for me, Jameis, you don't know what's going to happen. He's got big-time upside. It happened last night, which was great. But I wanted to look for a little more security. I'm in first place right now. I am 7-1, and I don't feel like getting cute. Although playing Jameis Winston wouldn't have been getting cute, playing Case Keenum this week would be getting cute in most leagues. Now, if you're in a 14 or 16 team league, you might play Case Keenum, and it'll be a good start if you're in a 14 or 16 team league. But we're in a 12 league, so hopefully, and I don't think I'm gonna get those Jameis Winston points. So hopefully, all the rest of my players will perform well. So I'm gonna get back to my roster in a minute because it relates. What I want to talk about today relates closely to what I actually had to go through this week with my own roster. So anyways, I discussed this last week, so I'm going to read the original letter, and then we'll go from the Commish. There was an owner in my league who had the Texans defense, and they were ahead going into Monday's game, and they didn't start a team defense at all. He told me he didn't want to risk losing any points just in case it happened. I don't think that he should be allowed to win by not starting a player or not starting a full roster. I think he should be penalized in some way, but he pointed out there's nothing in the rules that says he couldn't do it. Okay, it's not in the rules, but isn't there something I can do in the name of fair play so someone else doesn't copy what he did? So I could read my answer from last week, but I'm not. I'm just going to point out briefly, because I've been thinking about this, and there's a couple things I want to point out. And then it's funny because my situation this week isn't the same, but the ideas are, so we'll get into that. So, one, brief review. My short answer was that if the writer did not have any existing rules, then there really wasn't anything he could do. Even if, man, that's a douche move. That's Bush League. You shouldn't do. All right, that's another issue. But the point is, there wasn't a rule for him against doing it, so he can do it. That falls back on the commissioner, depending on what kind of rules they want to put forward. And rules change, as we know. A lot of you guys are in different leagues, multiple leagues, crazily like 10, 11. My head would explode. So I'm stating the obvious. They're different from league to league. All right. 2, at the very least, I said that he could address the league for this year, because you're not going to change rules. You're not going to add rules in the middle of a season. And for crying out loud, when this was last Monday's game, not this past, but last Monday's game was the Denver Texans game. And that's when the guy did what he did. So we're not changing any rules. We know that. So that might be something he could do in the offseason, which is what I suggested. But at the very least, I said he could address the league as a whole. You do it through email. You CC everyone so no one can say they didn't get the email. And you could just address that such an act should be discouraged. And you want to try to appeal to everyone's sense of fair play. That's the word he used, so that's what I used, and now I'll use it again today. You want to appeal to everyone's sense of fair play. And if you do that, and you don't come off, as a mother hen and with a bad tone, for example, official tangent number 1. I coach youth sports. I coach rugby. I coach football. I coached track. And football especially, they always say it's the ultimate team sport. If you come across a player that I have coached, if they actually remember, because you never know with kids, but if you ask them to finish the sentence, they should be able to finish this sentence. Be a good teammate. I say that over and over again. I always stress to them, I don't care. You don't have to like each other. You don't have to be friends. I don't care what you do when you're not on the field, but when you are together, you are a team, and you will help and you will respect each other, and you're fighting for a common goal. You shall be a good teammate. Now, what you do after you leave the field, I don't care. I'm not one of those kumbaya guys. You should all be friends. You should be friends. No. And you should all be... No. No, but you made a commitment to be a part of the team, so you be part of the team, and you help the team, you support the team, and you don't have to go eat cotton candy and have hot dogs afterwards. All right? So, official tangent drop, because I forgot what I was going to say. But I was taught it had to do with coaching youth sports and helping each other out. I'm trying to follow my line of thinking here. Help each other out, and all right, I lost it. So, but they use the term fair play, and I use the term fair play, but in an effort. Oh, tone. That's what it was, tone. So another thing that I say to them all the time is, you know what? Hold your teammates accountable. And if your teammate is walking when they should be running back to the drill, say something to them. And the one thing that I stress all the time, you can say the same thing many different ways. There's a number of players on the teams that I've coached throughout the years. I've been doing it for a while now, where I will simply look at them in the face and I will say, watch your tone. Watch your tone. And that's all I have to say. And they get it. Which means what? If you send a letter out to your league, there's so many ways you can deliver that message. You can come off as a major dictator, you can come off as an asshat, or you can just generally take the high road and be very official and judicious in the words that you use and get the message across without, creating hurt feelings, which now in some cases you just can't help. There are some people that are going to get bent just because they got out of bed. And there are going to be those guys, and it's usually guys that are looking to fight and argue any damn chance they get, no matter what it is. Sometimes you can't avoid those people, but generally, if you pick the right tone and you can deliver the message in a way where people won't feel defensive, they might even know you're talking about them, but they might actually appreciate the fact that you didn't point fingers and start whining and moaning and getting on their back like, their parents, their mom, their girlfriend, or whoever, right? So tone. And so I always say to the kids, hey, if someone is not in the right position, say, hey, come on, slide, man. And he might go, cool, thanks. What you might not want to do is, man, come on, man, get over. What's wrong with you? Right? Or I will have a player where they can make two choices. They can criticize what their teammate is doing, or they can help them. They can point out what they did and help them in the same breath, or they can criticize. One, especially when you're talking about kids, you know how it goes. If you don't like my tone, you're going to come off with a bad tone yourself. And yeah, that translates into adulthood as well. Along the way, a lot of adults learn how to just take the high road and ignore people like that. But when you're kids, you know, you haven't, either your parents haven't talked to you about how to deal with that, or you're still sorting things out. But whatever the reason, whatever the case is, you know, for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction, unless you learn how to manage it as you get older. But when you're young, if you're going to be snippy with me, I'm going to be snippy with you. And that's why I tell the kids, watch your tone. So anyways, that general letter with the right tone can introduce a bit of peer pressure, and that may help. And I also briefly talked about how the writer would need to add a rule or rules to their discretion during the off season. And that's what I want to talk about today on the FCS, the Fantasy Commissioner Show. So what exactly can he do? Okay, so let's go to the extreme. Let's hit the extreme. That's the part I want to address, really, because the extreme reaction is what's going to get the extreme opposite reaction and possibly cause dissent in the league, that sort of thing. So that's where I want to go. So he can make a hard-edged rule, you know, one of those no matter what rules, right? Which I would advise against. In this particular situation, there are times for some really strict no matter what rules, but there's a difference between the rule being rigid or strict because it needs to be, and there's a difference between that and a commissioner who's just trying to, as I like to say, rule with their iron hand just because they can. And oftentimes it's so unnecessary. There's a difference, folks, okay? So in this particular situation, I'm being specific. In this situation, you might want to avoid the no matter what rules, and here's why. Because such a rule would require, and I talked about this last week, but such a rule would require that every slot, for example, on a roster should have a player that is actively or potentially able to produce points. Now, in this scenario, I'm going to, because this was about the defense special team, so I'm going to call them a player too, all right? So when I say player, I am still talking about that defense special team slot for simplicity's sake, just to keep things simple. So every slot, the rule, you could go hard edge and go, every slot should have a player that is playing. Okay, we could go there. And we're not really going to discuss the penalty at the moment because that varies. That varies from league to league and, frankly, from one commissioner's ego to another. That's usually what determines, you know, the penalty, how people are going to be penalized and that sort of thing, or whether people get warnings or a second warning or no warnings at all. That goes from ego to ego. So we're not really going to address that. But I'm going to play devil's advocate with the hard edge, no matter what, the rule where, because this is where I think it's possible where, you know, I've heard, you know, once again, league to league. I know of leagues where, you know, people get penalized harshly. So that's what I'm going to discuss. So what happens if they're in a league with small benches and this particular player doesn't want to give up who he has. And let's just say his tight end, which is apropos for this particular week, this week, right now in the NFL, because right now, week 9, is it week 9? Yes, it's week 9. Is it week 9? Yeah! Thanks, dude. Week 9, there are a lot of good tight ends that are on bye this week. Now, I actually started Dennis Hooper, and some of you went, who? What? Dennis Hooper? Yeah, backup tight end for the Atlanta Falcons. Jacob Tamme is hurt, and I played him not in my league, but on a DFS play. It worked out fairly well because he was cheap. He was $3,000 on, what did I do this? It was Fantasy Aces. He's $3,000. And you can put a starting player who's going to get targets and starting for $3,000. That means you can go get more expensive players like, David Johnson, who's not playing this week, but I'm just using that as an example. So let's say that his tight end has a bye, this particular player, okay? And there are no other roster moves to make. So he can either cut a player that he needs or that he wants. A player that's on his roster, he's got to let him go. And why would he have to do that? Because he has to satisfy that hard rule no matter what, or you're going to get whatever the penalty happens to be. That's a choice he has to make. Or he puts his tight end in the slot and he takes a hit. He gets that 0. Now, if he puts that tight end who has a bye week in that slot, just to put him in the roster, just to put forward the roster with something in it, and it's not blank, so it's aesthetically pleasing, right? Well, that's to his own detriment. The move can actually hurt him. It's not going to hurt anyone else. So I argue that it's that player's call to make. It's their call to do that. And it's different. It's a different choice, folks, than when one of those players, in your league just forgets to pull a player. They just forget. The player's on a bye and they just forgot. They didn't do it for any other reason. They just forgot. That's different. You want to address that too. And once again, watch your tone. Now, getting back to the original example. So this is a strategic move. I was affected by this in a way, and that's why I'm connecting the two. But it's a strategic move. Very much like what? Not starting the Texans team defense. Right? Now, as a commissioner, there are some obvious things that you can and should police against. And I understand. I'm a commissioner too. Right? The show for commissioners by a commissioner. That's me. I get it. And I understand as a commissioner that you want everyone competing. You do. You don't want any slackers in your league. That's agreed. But if someone actively decides not to play a player to protect their lead, or they don't fill that slot because in order to do so it would hurt the strength of their roster, then that's on them. And they have to deal with how that plays out. Think about that. Just think about it. And last-minute scratches, they happen too. So yeah, now, and we really shouldn't make these assumptions, but we do. Everyone just assumes that everyone has because it's a cell phone, because they're computers, but whatever, that's another topic. But no, folks, everyone doesn't. Now, maybe in your circles they do, but I'm just really loath to just go, well, you should get on your phone. You should do this. You should. I don't like going that way. People hang out with with their kind, and I'm using that word loosely, but the point is, everyone's sitting here with their phones. What do you have? I have the iPhone. You Mac people, you Apple people, all that noise, right? But still, you get the point. So we expect everyone to be connected to their phone and their tablet. But guess what, guys? Life happens. Now, what if for some reason a player gets yanked at the last minute? You're going to penalize someone for that? Are you? You might. Some of you do. Some of you do. I don't go to church on Sunday, but some guys do. And depending on the church, they might be in service when the change, because we're talking about 1:00 games here. When the change happens, they might not be able to do anything. They might be in Sunday school. And yeah, there are some people who go to church and they're looking at their phones and they're running out and making changes. Yep, but there are a lot of people don't. They do it out of respect or for whatever reason. And I'm not knocking the person who runs out of church and messes with their lineups. That's not where I'm going. My point is that everyone's different. So when the change happens, they might not be able to do anything, or they might not be aware. And let's remember, not all churches are the same. So let's not do that. Come on, man, I make changes at church all the time. Yeah, you do so, but a lot of people don't. So the point is, technically, this guy can start a dead spot. And they can start someone who isn't playing right now, which is the same as leaving it open. Yes, the intent is different, but the result is the same. In one case, you choose to put up a 0. You make that choice. In the other, you didn't have a choice because you weren't able to act. You missed the last minute scratch. And that's just one example. So commissioners, when you are deciding how you want to address this scenario, be careful. Just be careful. I'm not telling you what to do, except be careful. I am telling you to do that. You can't tell me what to do. This is America. I can do whatever I want. Right. Be careful. Especially you dictators out there. You iron handers out there who have to micromanage everything. Who have to put your nose into everything. Who makes playing in your league a big pain in the ass. Just be careful. And you newbies who are figuring out what rules to do, even right now, week 9 during your first year, you're thinking, oh, I see, maybe I should have done this, and I'll do this next year. You be careful too. Be careful going down the dictator road. Be careful. Be careful with those no matter what takedowns. Be careful, because one size doesn't fit all. And I personally think that this is one area where you have to be what? Careful? You keep saying that. Yes, careful. People get upset, right? When someone pulls a defense, but not so much when they do it to preserve their roster. Think about that one. Well, man, I didn't have anyone to drop. I wasn't going to drop Mike Gillisley because, they're playing Seattle this week, but LaShawn McCoy, he's got those hamstring issues, man. I'm not dropping him. And I can't drop David Johnson. He's going to bye. You kidding me? I would never do that. So I just had to eat that. Yeah, I know, man. I had to do that last week. But if someone pulls a defense special teams and they just leave it, especially if it's against you, oh, man, no, you can't do that. Why is that? Why does that happen? Because this is just like when people are voting on someone else's trade. That's a big pet peeve of mine. They aren't thinking about the two players who are involved in the trade. They are thinking about how it affects them, which is not the proper thought process. And they vote accordingly with how it affects them. They're voting to okay someone else's trade, but they're thinking about how it affects them. Well, that's not the way to go. That's why you shouldn't be allowed to do it. And yep, I know there are leagues that allow it, and you should not. We've talked about that many, many times, and we'll keep talking about it forever, amen, because that's one of those fantasy things, man. One of those fantasy topics that really, really bugs me. So yeah, so most folks are okay with the latter when it's done to preserve their roster because they have been in that position before. They get it. It's deemed less likely of a douchey move, less push league, right? But when someone is trying to hold on to a lead, it looks like a wimpy move to win. But I would argue It's a competitive move to win. It's a competitive move to win, not a wimpy move to win. So getting back to my roster, just this week I was forced to drop someone that I didn't want to because I have a player who is hurt. Their backup is on a bye. Hunter Henry. I have Hunter Henry. I stack him with Phillip Rivers. Works out splendidly. News came out today that he's not playing. I have CJ Fedorowicz. He's on a bye. I did not want to drop a player to cover this hole in my roster, but I did. I had no choice. So I dropped Kenny Britt to get Lance Kendricks. Did not want to do that. Now, what if I had a lead? And let's say it's Monday. And let's say the Chargers are playing on Monday instead of Sunday. Guess what? I would not have dropped Kenny Britt. I would have ate it because I could. And that would be a strategic move on my part. If I'm ahead and my opponent doesn't have any more players playing, or if I'm ahead by, 23, 35, 30 points, and all they have is a kicker or a defensive player, no, I shouldn't be forced to hurt my roster, which frankly I feel I did. I actually did today about an hour ago before I sat in front of this microphone. 2 turntables and a microphone. But once again, look, I feel I didn't have a choice. Not because of some rule forcing me to make the move, but I had to make the move nonetheless on my own accord. Because we have, let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bench slots. That's it. And we don't have the deepest of rosters either. So I had to choose between Kenny Britt and someone else. This was not a ride it out weekend for me. So yes, you want league members to put forward a full roster. Guess what? They want to put forward a full roster too. Ask them. They want to put forward a full roster too, more than you want them to. No one moves forward with a roster intentionally wanting to put up less points than their opponent. All of us fantasy players, what do we want? Unless we're loony in the head, right? What do we want? We want the maximum amount of points possible. That's why all week, what do we hear on sports radio and fantasy radio and all that? Who do I start? Who do I start? Who do I drop? Who do I start? Who do I sit? Who do I start? All that angst. Because we're trying to get the maximum amount of points possible. So when someone actually decides to not play a player, they are not doing it so you can beat them. They're not doing it to lose. We know this. So that's why in this specific case, in this specific scenario that we're talking about, be careful with the all or nothing mandate. I just went over one example. It hurt me to try, and once again, it's related, but I just said it. If my guy, if the Chargers are playing on Monday, I'm eating that. Oh, and I know I'm ahead, Anyways, I said what I said. I'm not going to repeat it. We fantasy players are not intentionally going out to lose. And that's what you need to keep in mind when you're trying to decide how you want to penalize people if they don't put forward a roster. Just think about it. I think it's an issue no, it's not even an issue. It should be addressed. It should be addressed, though, as a goal of the league, along with general things like, message board behavior. Present it to the league as a set of expectations rather than a hard and fast rule. Because I guarantee you, no. Okay, let me not say that. But one day you may be pressed by your own rule. All I'm asking you guys to do is just slow up a little bit. Think about the big picture in this regard. And I'm not necessarily a fan of the unwritten rule, especially since I advocate with rule number 1, put it in writing. But league goals and expectations, they can be put in writing too, right? As opposed to, you will forfeit the game, you will lose the weekly prize money, or whatever penalty you might think you want to institute, to lay the smack down, right? If someone doesn't have an active or a potential point producer. Just think about it. I want you guys to have a good week 9. Much success to you. I am glad you took the moment to listen to me, Reginald James, the Commissioner. This is the Fantasy Commissioner Show. Remember, check me out on Twitter at Commish Show. You can send me an email, thecommissshow@outlook.com. This is the Commish, Reginald James. Until next time, see ya.